The trade war didn't start with a tariff. It started with a feeling. A feeling in Washington that the world's second largest economy was getting rich by bending the rules. And a feeling in Beijing that the world's largest economy had decided China was finally too powerful to tolerate. By the time the first tariffs hit, this wasn't about steel or soybeans anymore. It was about who gets to write the rules of the global economy, and whether those rules still matter. This matters right now, because the trade war never really ended. It just went quiet. Prices are still higher, supply chains are still fragile, and the next escalation may not look like tariffs at all. So let's rewind, slowly, and tell this story the way it actually happened, not as a shouting match, but as a system quietly breaking under its own math. For decades, the deal was simple. The United States consumed, China produced. American companies wanted cheap labor, Chinese factories wanted orders, consumers wanted low prices, investors wanted profits. Everybody got something. When China joined the World Trade Organization in 2001, the doors opened wide. Factories moved east, prices dropped west, shelves filled up, inflation stayed low. For years, this setup looked almost magical. Cheap goods everywhere, stable prices, and a global economy that felt smoother than ever before. On the surface, it looked like a perfect arrangement. But underneath, something unbalanced was forming. The US wasn't just importing goods, it was exporting entire industries. Manufacturing towns hollowed out, jobs disappeared, supply chains stretched across oceans. China, meanwhile, wasn't just assembling products, it was learning. Every factory deal, every joint venture, every partnership, they absorbed know-how, processes, scale. This wasn't an accident, it was strategy. China didn't want to stay the world's factory forever, it wanted to move up. Phones, electric cars, advanced chips, artificial intelligence. And that's when the math stopped working for Washington. Because trade deficits aren't just accounting entries, they're political pressure. By the late 2010s, the US was running massive trade deficits with China. Factories were gone, wages were stagnant, and the promise that everyone wins didn't feel real anymore. That frustration built slowly, election after election, speech after speech, until it finally snapped into policy. That's when tariffs arrived. The logic was blunt. Tax Chinese imports, force companies to bring jobs back, punish unfair behavior. Tariffs sound technical. They're not. They're taxes at the border, and someone always pays. Here's the uncomfortable truth. China didn't write the checks. American companies did. And then those costs moved downstream. Higher prices, lower margins, more inflation pressure. For many households, the trade war wasn't something they followed in the news. It showed up quietly at the checkout counter, on monthly bills, in prices that never quite came back down. Politically, though, tariffs worked. They looked tough. They created a clear enemy. China responded exactly how systems do when pushed. Tariffs of their own, targeted retaliation, pressure points. Farmers got hit. Exporters panicked. Markets swung every time negotiations stalled. At one point, both sides even announced a truce. Deals were signed, cameras flashed, but underneath, most of the pressure stayed in place. Because by then, this was no longer about fixing trade, it was about leverage. But here's the irony. Trade didn't collapse, it rerouted. Factories shifted to Vietnam, Mexico, Southeast Asia. Same supply chains, different flags. But rerouting wasn't free. Every move added friction, New factories, new contracts, new risks. What used to be one clean supply chain became 3 or 4 overlapping ones. That meant more paperwork, more delays, more costs hiding in places consumers never see. Companies called it diversification, but in plain terms, it meant paying extra to feel slightly safer. And that cost didn't disappear. It showed up quietly, in prices, in delivery times, and in how fragile everything felt the moment something went wrong. The trade deficit barely moved, which exposed a deeper reality. This was never just a trade war, it was a technology war. What really scared Washington wasn't cheap goods, it was competition. China wasn't just exporting products anymore, it was exporting alternatives, phones, cars, platforms. So the strategy escalated. Export controls, chip bans, investment restrictions. This time, the target wasn't prices, it was progress. Slow China down, protect the technological edge, control the choke points. But systems don't like being boxed in. China responded by pouring money into domestic production, building parallel supply chains, reducing reliance where it could. Not perfect systems, but resilient ones. And the world felt the shift. Companies were forced to choose resilience over efficiency, meaning higher costs now in exchange for fewer shocks later. Governments started thinking in terms of risk, not cost. Globalization didn't end, it fractured. More redundancy, higher costs, permanent uncertainty. And here's the part no one really wants to admit. Both sides paid. The US absorbed higher prices and inflation pressure. China faced slower growth and rising financial stress. There was no clean victory. Which brings us to now. The tariffs are still in place, the distrust runs deeper, and the next conflict won't look like a trade dispute. It will be about control. Control over technology, over data, over supply chains, over the future economic order. The trade war was only the opening chapter, and the real question isn't who won. It's whether the global economy can function when its two biggest players no longer trust each other to play by the same rules. Because once trust breaks, efficiency stops mattering. And history suggests that systems built purely on efficiency don't survive once politics enters the room. If you want more videos that break down complex finance ideas in simple words without the noise, like this video and subscribe to the channel, because the cost of this trade war may not be fully visible yet.